Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we will see what the smile entity is. One of the most twisted, terrifying, and monstrous entities to ever hit the big screen is the smile entity. With its macabre expression, this malevolent presence not only toys with the minds of its victims, but it feeds on their deepest traumas, dragging them toward a dark and inevitable fate. That's why in this video, I'll explain in detail the history and origins of the smile entity. I'll give you a summary of its story across the different movies. Then I'll talk about its physical appearance, its personality, and its incredible known abilities and weaknesses. The story begins with Rose, a highly competent and dedicated therapist, known for her ability to effectively treat her patients. Her life seems to be focused on helping others, but the ghosts of her past soon begin to haunt her in a terrifying way. The first hint that something is wrong comes when Rose treats a man named Carl. This patient, extremely manic, continuously murmurs that everyone is going to die. Despite Rose's efforts to calm him and give him a logical explanation, Carl's episodes become increasingly intense and frightening. Rose, confused and concerned, struggles to find a way out of her patient's emotional overflow. However, when an unexpected emergency interrupts her day, her world begins to collapse completely. The emergency has a name and face. Laura Weir, a traumatized young woman who has just witnessed the brutal murder of her teacher. This man, seemingly driven mad, struck his head with a hammer until he killed him in front of her. Laura, terrified, insists that something even more horrifying is stalking her. A malevolent presence that takes the form of other people and seems to be after her. Rose, always rational and scientific, tries to reassure the young woman, suggesting that she might be experiencing post-traumatic stress. However, things take a macabre turn when Laura, overcome with panic, screams at Rose that the presence has already come for her. Before Rose can intervene, Laura grabs a piece of the broken vase and takes her own life in front of the therapist, leaving Rose completely devastated and in shock. This traumatic event marks the beginning of Rose's downward spiral. As she investigates, she realizes that something strange is happening. The entity behind the tragedies seems to be following her, stalking her every step. The hallucination episodes intensify, and the malevolent presence begins to manifest in her life, no longer just in her mind, but physically, stalking her at every corner. After this heartbreaking event, Rose is forced to face her own history of suffering, burdened by her past, her mother's overdose, and the feeling that something dark is unraveling in her mind. Throughout the film, the entity increasingly reveals itself as a being that feeds on the trauma of its victims. When Rose begins to investigate Laura's suicide and its connections to other cases, she discovers that the malevolent presence is not an isolated event. It is a chain of occurrences that affects those who witness extreme tragedies, leaving its victims trapped in a cycle of suffering. This entity attaches itself to people through their traumas, and the only way to break the cycle is by transferring the curse to another person, leading to an even more disturbing outcome. As Rose becomes more trapped in this spiral of terror, her own family and friends begin to distrust her. Her fiancé, Trevor, doesn't know how to deal with Rose's strange behavior, and the distance between them grows. The relationship with her sister, Holly, also deteriorates as Rose tries to explain the unexplainable, facing misunderstanding and rejection from her loved ones. Eventually, Rose embarks on a desperate investigation, searching for clues about other suicide cases and people who have been touched by the entity. As she explores these events, she discovers that there are more people who have been marked by the same curse, and they all seem to have witnessed something macabre. In her search, she meets a prisoner who seems to know more about the entity and reveals the truth behind the curse. The only way to escape is by killing someone and ensuring that another person witnesses the crime, thus transferring the curse. The truth is even more terrifying than Rose had imagined. Over time, she finds herself trapped in a moral and existential dilemma, while struggling to find a way to break the cycle of terror consuming her. However, her attempts to find an escape only plunge her deeper into madness. The entity's macabre smile continues to haunt her, and finally, when it seems like she has found a way to free herself, she discovers that everything she has experienced has been part of an even greater nightmare. The story culminates in a heartbreaking final scene, where Rose confronts the entity in a showdown that forces her to make a definitive choice. Though she fights to free herself from the curse, the entity seems always one step ahead of her, reminding her that there is no escape. In the last scene, Rose makes a drastic and terrifying decision, sealing her fate as the macabre smile continues to haunt her soul. The story continues a few days after the events of the first movie. Here, we meet Joel, a man tormented by strange visions of Rose, who appears burned alive. This happens because he was the one who saw Rose set herself on fire in the previous story, and now the entity is pursuing him. Joel encounters a man on the road, a gangster who has just arrived by car and intends to murder another man in front of his brother, just like in the first film. The story follows the same pattern. The guilty party commits suicide after a violent death, as they try to escape the curse of the smiling demon. Joel, who is a police officer, sees this as an opportunity to end the curse once and for all, and decides to pass the burden to this gangster by stabbing him in front of his brother. However, things don't go as he expected. A police intervention and a shooting cause the gangster's brother to accidentally die, leading Joel into a state of panic. Unintentionally, he is now the one who must face the curse. Trapped, Joel decides to pass it on to another witness present, a random man who unknowingly becomes his next target. With this first event, we begin to see how the curse continues its unstoppable cycle. Joel finds himself trapped between the police, his guilt, and the imminent threat of the demonic creature. Eventually, he decides to flee, and while escaping, he is hit by a van, whose driver can't avoid the impact, running over Joel's body. The image is brutal. His body is shattered, his foot detached from the rest of his body, as the vehicle continues on its way. Now, we jump forward a week, where we meet Skye Riley, a pop singer who has been struggling with her personal demons, including a drug addiction. After an accident in which her ex-boyfriend died, Skye is forced to deal with the aftermath, both physically and emotionally. As she tries to leave her problems behind, she plans a comeback tour. During her interview, she talks about the internal struggles she's had and how she lost control due to her addiction, but she seems to be clean now. However, things soon get complicated when the smiling demon finds her. During one of her practices, Skye feels unbearable pain due to the scars from her accident. After a brief conversation with her assistant, she runs into Louis Fregoli, her dealer, who appears to be in a state of panic. Louis reveals to her that something strange is happening, and during the encounter, he is possessed by the smiling demon, who brutally kills him by smashing his face against a 35-pound weight plate. The horror unfolds when Skye, terrified, witnesses Louis's death, but decides not to tell anyone for fear of her past being exposed. Skye's life begins to crumble. After this incident, the curse follows her. She frequently sees her deceased ex-boyfriend and other beings in terrifying visions. Panic takes over her as she starts seeing figures from her past that seem to be connected to the smiling demon. As the curse progresses, Skye begins to lose her grip on reality, being tormented by strange manifestations. Her mother, her assistant, and other members of her team grow concerned about her increasingly erratic behavior. Skye desperately searches for a solution to end the curse and meets Morris, a strange man who reveals the origin of the smiling demon. He tells her that the curse is passed through the violent death of a witness, like an endless cycle that repeats itself. Morris suggests that she temporarily stop her heart to cut the connection with the demon, but Skye is too terrified to follow his advice. As the curse gains strength, Skye finds herself trapped in a spiral of horror with no way out, and the cycle of terror seems endless. The story delves into a whirlwind of psychological horror as Skye tries to find a way to escape her fate. Tension rises, and the climax leads to an ending as brutal as the previous deaths. And now that we have thoroughly covered its story, I want to talk to you about the physical appearance of the Smile entity, what we know about its personality and behavior, and I will explain its incredible abilities and how to survive and defeat this creature. The monster in Smile is a terrifying entity that manifests in a visually disturbing way. Its physical form is tied to the psychology of the victims and its ability to take the appearance of people who have been previously affected by the evil, meaning those who have experienced the curse. This allows it to transform into a deformed and terrifying version of itself. The monster does not have a constant form, but victims often see smiling people who are possessed by the entity. The most terrifying feature is the smile, which, although it seems natural at first, becomes grotesque and exaggerated, often with sharp teeth or a horrifying grimace that distorts the faces of those people. The eyes become bloodshot, adding an even more sinister tone. This deformity seems to amplify the fears and desperation of the victims, as if the entity is taking control of the psychological reality of the person. As the movie progresses, the monster manifests more frequently and in more complex forms. Its appearance becomes darker and more twisted. It is shown that the entity feeds off suffering and fear, evolving into a more monstrous and demonic form. The smile grows increasingly inhuman and exaggerated, to the point of losing any trace of humanity. The creature seems to become more tangible and physical at certain moments, suggesting it is manifesting in a more direct way as the curse progresses. In the climax of the film, the monster finally appears in its purest and most grotesque form. It is a blend between a disfigured human shape and an almost demonic presence. The face distorts completely, and the smiles turn into unnatural grimaces. In these moments, the entity reveals itself as something completely alien to humanity, showing a sort of demonic face that reflects the worst nightmares of the affected person. The creature's physical form is so influenced by the psyche of its victims that it can take on an increasingly horrific and monstrous appearance. The evolution of the Smile monster is a clear reflection of how psychological horror can take on a physical form, becoming more terrifying and tangible as the victim sinks further into despair. The monster in Smile does not have a personality in the traditional sense of having desires, goals, or motivations of its own. Instead, it feeds on the fear and anguish of people, making it a parasitic and manipulative entity. What seems to be a smile is actually a manifestation of evil and chaos. The victim's smile becomes a clue to their interaction with the monster, as the entity takes advantage of people's vulnerability to extend its influence. The most unsettling aspect of this monster's personality is its ability to manipulate and distort the reality of its victims, taking on the forms of those who have been consumed by the curse. This gives it an almost omnipresent ability to stalk its victims from the darkness of their minds, as it can appear as anyone close to them, but always with that disturbing and unnatural smile. This ability to impersonate someone trustworthy, but with a terrifying behavior and appearance, allows it to generate a sense of paranoia and psychological terror. It is not immediately aggressive. Rather than attacking directly, the entity takes its time to infiltrate the minds of its victims. It presents itself as a smile or a familiar human figure to deceive its victims, establishing an emotional bond before the horror begins to overflow. Once the victim begins to experience the effects of the curse, the monster plays with their fear and anguish, amplifying their feelings of desperation and guilt. The smile monster possesses abilities that are deeply tied to psychological terror and the manipulation of the human mind. It is not a physical creature that attacks directly with strength or power, but rather an entity that exploits human fears and emotions to unleash chaos and despair. Its abilities are subtle, but extremely powerful, as they are based on mind control and the perception of reality. The most prominent ability of the monster is its capacity to manipulate the mind of its victims. Through the curse, it can distort the person's reality, driving them into a state of paranoia and despair. It feeds on negative emotions, such as fear, guilt, anxiety, and anguish. This manipulation creates an atmosphere of uncertainty and continuous terror, where the victim cannot trust their own senses or the people around them. As the victim becomes more aware of the entity, the bond between them and the monster grows stronger. The monster has the ability to interfere with people's memories and perceptions. Through its manifestations, it can make victims relive traumatic moments from their lives or distort their perceptions of what is happening in the present. By altering memory and perception, the entity manages to plunge the victim into a spiral of despair, where they don't know what is real and what is part of the illusion created by the monster. One of the most terrifying abilities of the monster is its ability to take on the appearance of people close to the victim. It can manifest as friends, family members, or even people who have already fallen under its influence. This ability makes the victims doubt their own minds and places them in a vulnerable situation, as the monster can disguise itself as someone trustworthy and then strike at the most unexpected moment. The unnatural smile it displays is the key to identifying it, but in many cases, it is too late when the victim realizes the threat. The smile is perhaps the most symbolic and terrifying ability of the monster. This smile appears grotesque and unnatural, especially when shown on the face of those who have been possessed by the entity. The smile acts as an indicator of the curse, symbolizing the psychological and emotional distortion caused by the monster. Instead of being an expression of happiness, the smile becomes a manifestation of suffering and horror. It is like a tool of control, as the victim starts to see strange or disturbing smiles on the people around them, increasing their paranoia and fear. The monster spreads through direct eye contact with the victim. When a person sees someone possessed by the entity smiling grotesquely, the monster begins to infiltrate the victim's mind, introducing the curse. This cycle is what allows the monster to spread throughout the movie, as every time a victim witnesses the smile of someone possessed, they are doomed to be the next one attacked. This eye contact is key to its expansion, creating a sense of inevitability and paranoia in the development of the story. The monster also seems to have the ability to amplify human emotions, particularly negative ones. As the victim faces the monster, feelings of despair, guilt, and anxiety intensify, driving the person into a state of mental breakdown. This ability allows it to manipulate the human psyche in an almost invisible way, causing the victim to become increasingly vulnerable and susceptible to possession and control by the monster. Although it is not always physically present, the monster in Smile seems to have an almost omnipresent ability. It infiltrates every aspect of the victim's life, lurking in the shadows of their mind. No matter where the person is, the monster can appear in their vision, in their dreams, or even in seemingly normal moments, creating a sense that there is no escape. Its presence is always latent, waiting for the victim to break completely. Defeating the Smile monster is no easy task, as its power is based on psychological manipulation and reality distortion. However, there are some strategies and approaches that could help survive and eventually defeat this entity. The key to surviving this entity is resisting its emotional influence. The monster feeds on fears, anxiety, and negative emotions. A person who manages to stay calm, rational, and in control of their emotions will have a greater capacity to resist manipulation. Not letting oneself be dragged into terror and paranoia is essential to avoid falling into its psychological trap. Meditation, mindfulness, or any other relaxation technique could help maintain calm in moments of tension. The monster infiltrates through eye contact and mind manipulation. It is crucial to maintain close relationships with trusted people who have not been possessed by the entity. An emotionally supportive environment can act as a barrier against the monster's manipulation. By isolating oneself or distrusting everyone, the victim falls into the same pattern of despair the entity aims to create. It is vital to maintain a connection with loved ones who can help keep perspective. Since the entity is based on reality distortion, one way to protect oneself is to learn to question the perception of what is happening. The victim must be able to recognize when things are not real, such as the eerie smile of someone or the appearances of close people. By challenging the illusion the monster creates, the victim can regain some control over their environment. Although very difficult, the ability to discern what is real from what is illusory could be a vital defense against the entity. The monster spreads through eye contact. One possible way to prevent the evil from spreading is to avoid looking at people who are possessed or have been infected by the entity. Covering one's eyes or closing their vision could interrupt the curse cycle. In an extreme scenario, temporarily blinding oneself, although this would also have consequences, could be a way to escape the entity's reach. Another alternative might be to create visual barriers, such as curtains or dark glasses, to block direct contact with those who have been infected. The monster is not just an entity, but a curse that is transmitted between people. The most effective way to stop the monster would be to trace the origin of the curse and find a way to break it. In the movie, the curse originated through a murder and was transmitted from person to person. One possible approach would be to discover how the curse began and find a way to eradicate it, such as undoing the contagion cycle, stopping the source of the curse, or even destroying the monster itself. This could involve confronting and facing the entity in its purest form. One of the crucial aspects of the entity is its ability to disguise itself and manipulate people's minds, making them see what is not. If a victim can see the monster for what it truly is, a manifestation of psychological terror and not an invulnerable physical creature, they could gain power over it. This might involve unraveling the curse's rules and using the knowledge gained to confront the entity more effectively, stripping it of its power by exposing it as an illusion created by the mind. The smile is a manifestation of the monster, and the characters must learn to recognize it as such. By understanding that this smile is the key to the curse, victims could develop psychological resistance, avoiding falling into the same terror cycle. This knowledge could be a lifesaver, as it allows victims to recognize the entity before being fully possessed. Accepting and challenging the curse from this perspective, rather than fearing it, could be crucial to surviving. The monster feeds on human emotions, particularly guilt, pain, and fear. One strategy could be to face the deeper emotions the entity uses to control you. People affected by the curse must be able to confront their traumas and emotions, releasing them instead of allowing themselves to be consumed by them. The process of forgiveness, acceptance, or emotional resolution could reduce the power the monster has over a person, weakening its control. Since the monster is linked to its victims through psychological manipulation, it might be possible to sever this bond if some way to break the mental or emotional connection is discovered. This could involve performing a ritual or using a symbolic object that allows cutting the link between the entity and the victim. If the monster depends on the human psyche to feed and spread its influence, destroying that connection could be the way to defeat it. Unlike other monsters that can be defeated through direct action, the smile monster is a psychological and emotional manifestation. The entity cannot be defeated with weapons or physical fights. The confrontation with the monster must primarily be psychological, using intelligence, self-control, and understanding of the entity's nature to prevent it from exerting its power. And that's all we know so far about the smile entity. Honestly, the first time I watched the movie, I didn't finish it because the ending had been spoiled for me, and I didn't know the monster had such a grotesque appearance. I thought it was just the smile of people, and that was it. I really liked its design and the idea of a monster that always follows you. But let me know your opinion in the comments. Did you already know about the smile entity? Do you think such a malevolent and monstrous being could actually exist? And finally, if you had to face this entity, what would you do? Share your answers to these questions and your general opinion about the smile entity. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you liked it, share it to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of my new videos.